The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. What happened to my voice then? All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday, July 14th. Too much cheering during the game. Yeah, we just finished watching, and a couple of hours ago, watching the Spain-France game. A really good game. Spain just dominated. I mean, dominated. It was a little embarrassing for France. I mean, France, a great team, but they were no match for Spain today. They were just no match for Spain today. So Spain goes on to final. They won 2-0. If they play this well, I don't see how Argentina or England could beat them. Maybe by playing a more physical game. I don't know, but I don't know how either England or Argentina could beat them. Tomorrow is England Argentina. That'll be quite a game, I'm sure. Last time Spain played this well, they won the World Cup in 2010, I think it was. And at the time, they were so dominant. And they played such a beautiful game that I think a lot of experts, and I'm not an expert, but I certainly agreed with them, thought this team is going to dominate football for years to come. And they didn't, which is kind of interesting. They didn't. They didn't, they didn't do well in the 2014, 2018, 2022 finals. World Cup, finally, they did well this year. So, but it's the same style of football. Short passes, lots of passes, dominate the ball. Other teams try to play this kind of football, but Spain just dominates it, and they know exactly what they're doing. And they didn't even need. I mean, Yamal played well, but it wasn't like he didn't score any goals, and he didn't. There was no spark. He was the one who caused the penalty, which was the first goal. But yeah. Good game. That was fun. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's game, and then the final. No matter who wins tomorrow, either it's England or it's Argentina. The final will be gritty. The final will be good. So looking forward to that. All right. So we are going to talk about Michael Knowles. You guys, or somebody has been asking for it for a while now. Michael Knowles on the Industrial Revolution. He doesn't really talk about the Industrial Revolution. We'll get to that. Even though the title of the video is "The Industrial Revolution has been a disaster for the human race," and he says that once, but he doesn't really talk about why and how, and what he means by that. Sadly, at least I didn't see it. But there's enough here to talk about, and he's so full of it. And he says what he says with such authority and calm and self-assuredness. The number of people who are just being completely and utterly deceived by this con artist, it really is stunning. So let's watch this video by Michael Knowles, and I will of course stop it and comment on it. Again, it's called "The Industrial Revolution has been a disaster for human race," and let's see what he says. I will comment. We'll see how long we go. I mean, it's a pretty long segment where he keeps repeating himself and he doesn't really say much. So I might skip ahead at some point to where, let me just find, one second, because I need to have kind of maybe skip ahead once or twice to where I think he brings in a new point because he is so goddamn repetitive. All right, here we go. Tell me if there's any issue with the audio or anything else. And, I have to say, thank you. I mean, the show didn't even start, hadn't even started. And you guys had already basically contributed the first hour goal. So we've met the first hour goal. So that's amazing. And keep it coming, because we have to make up for the fact that yesterday was really, really bad. But, keep it coming. And... But a lot of $20 and $50 questions, and it would be great to get more of those. And then it would be great to get just stickers. And amazing. We already did the first hour goal. Let's see if we can reach 3-hour goal. All right, here we go. Let's see, press play.
In American history was the Industrial Revolution, the Second Industrial Revolution.
So his argument is, I guess it started a little late there. His argument is that political violence, peak political violence, was during the late 19th century, what he calls the Second Industrial Revolution. That is the Industrial Revolution that followed the Civil War. That was peak political violence. And he's talking here a lot about political violence as a outgrowth, really, of capitalism. Political violence as the consequence of economic freedom. So, and he's got a point. It's overstating it, but he's got a point.
Revolution. There have been plenty of periods of political violence in American history. Probably we think of the Civil War. That would be an example of it, which was right at the beginning of the Second Industrial Revolution and did involve economic changes that pertain to slavery. But even let's just take that one out for a second.
Should.
Yeah. You think of political violence in the 1960s and 70s with regard to civil rights and some of the social movements that were being funded by the communists. You think of little
social movement funded by the communists. So civil rights funded by the communists? Civil rights movement a bad thing? Martin Luther King a bad guy? And he was killed, by the way. So I don't know if Martin Luther King's murder was done by a communist. Malcolm X's murder done by a communist. Robert F. Kennedy. I don't know. I mean, he says stuff like this and he throws it out. And he throws stuff like this out with such confidence. Why would you question it? Why would you think, is that true? No, he says it like he's a complete authority on this stuff. And there's no question. The communists funded the political violence in the 1960s and 70s. Now, they funded some, no question. But just to throw it off like that, it's just typical of Knowles. Facts don't matter, but it's his assertions that matter. And he knows his audience. So he can assert, as long as it's consistent with the kind of the general trend of his listeners, he can just assert stuff, throw it out there, and then it becomes law, right? Communists are funding political violence all over the place, and they have been since the 1960s, and all the political violence in the 60s and 70s, that was communist. We know it was funded because Michael Knowles said so, and he said so with authority. It's how when you repeat lies over and over and over again, it almost becomes established truths. People stop questioning it. Both left and right are very good at this. Very, very good at this.
Violence in the 1960s and 70s with regard to civil rights and some of the social movements that were being funded by the communists. You think of little rebellions that popped up in the 18th century. But the most sustained period of political unrest and violence in American history occurs from roughly the 1880s through the 19-teens, basically right up to and right into World War I. That's when you had the Haymarket Affair, 1886. You had bombings in Chicago. You had Pullman guards shooting people and being killed themselves. You had the Homestead Strike in 1892. You had the Pullman Strike in 1894. You had the Ludlow Massacre in 1914 in Colorado. You had the Wall Street bombings in the 19-teens and 20s by left-wing anarchists, the exact same kind of people who would be called Antifa today. You had Marxist professors from Harvard, no joke, setting off bombs in the Capitol. Eerily similar to what we're looking at today.
Yeah, we have Marxist professors from Harvard setting up bombs in the Capitol today. Is there similarity there? Really, is it similar? He's right. All of that happened. 1880 and 1920, there was a lot of political violence in the United States, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But absolutely, he'll blame two causes, and there's some truth to both. But yes, this is a time of a lot of kind of left-wing anarchists, very, very active. This is a time of conflicts between unions and business, and the state getting involved in the middle of that. And of course, this is a 40-year period, 40. The other periods were much shorter. So he's kind of comparing apples and oranges. But okay, I'm going to give him 1880, 1920, a lot of political violence in the United States, a lot. And interesting why it stopped in 1920, but okay.
And it was occurring over that period of time. And what was driving it was not transgenderism or some cultural issue.
Transgenderism. Where did that even come from? 1880s to 1920s. It's just these people have just one thing on their mind.
Was being driven in part by immigrants, because immigrants were heavily involved in it. But the big social change that was going on was the Industrial Revolution.
True. So this is also the period of industrialization had already started, of course, particularly in the North, much earlier. Most of this violence is in the North. But this is a period in which massive economic growth, unbelievable economic growth, and a huge rise in standard of living, quality of life, wages, income, wealth, and that is true for rich, middle class, and poor. Everybody their wages and wealth is accelerating and rising dramatically. It's also a time of massive immigration and a lot of resentment between different immigrant groups who are coming to this country, bringing some of the resentment from the old country to America, and that is part of the conflict. But the main conflict is, what is the main conflict, Michael?
The Second Industrial Revolution that was totally changing the relationship of citizen to state and of workers to employer.
How is it changing the relationship between citizen to state? He never elaborates on that, and I don't think that's really true. Certainly, it was changing the relationship between workers, employees, and employers, and it was changing the nature of jobs. It was huddling people into cities, whereas before people were more, out in the countryside. People were coming from the countryside in Europe, from little villages and little towns and agricultural communities in Europe, and they were coming and suddenly congregating in Boston and New York and Chicago and in very, very condensed, very, very highly populated neighborhoods and areas. So yes, all this is happening.
And changing how capital was being employed, and
changing how capital was being deployed. I mean, again, he would have to elaborate how changes in capital being deployed brought about this political violence. Certainly, that was happening.
I think that we conservatives, because we realized that Karl Marx was very possibly possessed by the devil.
I think he means that. He means that Karl Marx was possessed by the devil. I mean, really? Really?
Excellent book by Paul Kenger, by the way, The Devil and Karl Marx. Highly recommend.
There you go, The Devil and
recommend
Karl
on the
Marx.
subject. Because of that, we kind of write off the Marxist critiques of markets and history, but the Marxists actually do make a fair number of interesting observations.
I love this. I love that he's right. He's absolutely right. Right on. Right. He's not lying to you. He's telling you what he really thinks. And the reality is that you conservatives out there, you would, if you read Marx and you read his critiques of capitalism, you would go, yeah, we agree with a lot of this. This is absolutely true. And indeed, the biggest critics of capitalism in the 19th century, in Europe at least, the biggest critics of capitalism in Europe were conservatives, particularly in places like Germany. They resented the fact that people were moving to the cities and abandoning old towns, they resented the fact that people were becoming more secular and abandoning their commitment to religion. They resented kind of the greater freedom that people had to move, to create, to build, to make. They wanted things to stay the same as they always were because they were, let me see, what's the name? Oh, they're conservatives. They want to conserve the tradition, the past. And the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, is shattering the past, shattering tradition, all in the name of human prosperity, all in the name of human well-being, all dramatically improving human life. But that's not what the conservatives are concerned about. They're concerned about tradition for the sake of tradition. They're concerned about the past for the sake of the past. Remember, Michael Knowles venerates the, was it 1220, and the cathedrals. All those peasants dying while building cathedrals. Hundreds, they took sometimes over 100 years to build. That's what he longs for. That is the good.
Their prescriptions are horrible, but they do make interesting observations.
Interesting observations. Interesting because he thinks they're true. Karl Marx, the leftist critique of capitalism, and the conservative critique of capitalism, in many respects, are very similar. They don't like the individualism. Karl's main critique, and you can see this in his first essay that he published, which was called On the Jewish Question, his main critique is of individualism. What he really hates is individualism. It's egoism. It's self-interest. What is the main thing conservatives like Michael Knowles hate about capitalism, about freedom? It's individualism. It's egoism.
And it does seem to me that periods of massive technological change leave societies very vulnerable to violence. And this is what brought me to Uncle Ted. You know, the old Unabomber, Ted.
Uncle Ted, the old Unabomber, Uncle Ted. It's his pal, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
Kaczynski was a pretty sharp guy, you know, graduate of top schools. Did he ever graduate or did he drop out? Anyway, very, top schools, top education. Think he got a little messed up by the CIA, goes totally crazy and becomes a murderer.
Why not? Why not blame the CIA for Ted Kaczynski going crazy rather than blame his ideas for making him, I don't know if he was crazy. I mean, if you read the manifesto, it doesn't seem like a crazy manifesto. It's wrong. It's evil. It's bad. It's evil. But crazy, I don't know. And he kills people for good cause. So, crazy? And here's the thing. Michael Knowles, sympathetic to Marxist critique of capitalism, and indeed sympathetic to Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber's critique of capitalism and modern society. This is the new right. The new right is anti-liberty, anti-freedom, and unequivocally anti-capitalism, anti-free markets. They hate, despise, reject capitalism with everything. They really, really, really are offended by it. And Michael Knowles is a great illustration of it.
Ted, worth revisiting here.
How many murderers do we call Uncle Ted? Uncle Ted.
Not emulating his tactics, obviously, but just revisiting his observations. He opens up his manifesto, Industrial Society and Its Future, by saying, the Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. And he makes points about political change, especially political change on the right, that I think we ought to take to heart, because one of the recent overlords of the world, Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, don't forget what he refers to this time period as. He calls it the fourth industrial revolution. You had the first industrial revolution, which brought you, mechanized production. Then you have the second industrial revolution, and that starts to bring you things like the assembly line. That starts to bring you things like electricity.
Assembly line
then
is
you
in
have the
20s.
third industrial revolution. That's the data revolution. And now we're in this fourth industrial revolution where you have all of this kind of biohacking, artificial intelligence, dreams of transhumanism and cyborgs and really freaky stuff.
Now, this is, I think, what really scares many of these conservatives. Transhumanism, this idea of tinkering with the DNA of human beings to make us better, smarter, stronger, maybe even one day putting chips in our brains, maybe giving us bionic arms, that freaks them out. There's nothing that scares them more than that. This is part of why they are so upset with modernity and so resistant, I think, now to AI, because it's God. I mean, you're playing God. You're human beings and you're playing God. And they're scared, right? Innovation, change, the future, modernity, people having the ability to make choices about their kids' biology, maybe even their own biology. That scares the bejesus out of them. Think about a mentality that is oriented towards tradition, oriented towards conserving the past, oriented towards faith. Suddenly, science is making it possible to play God. I mean, these guys would have stopped the gene editing, CRISPR technology. They would have killed it if they could have. They hate the idea of longevity and longevity science and tinkering with the human genome, maybe, or genes to extend life. Why can't we go back to how it was in 1220? Life was so simple then. You were born, 50% of you died before the age of 10, and the rest of you lived, a simple life of hard work, of suffering, of fearing God, and you died maybe at age 30, maybe 40, maybe 50, and you went straight to heaven because you didn't have any opportunity and not a single opportunity to commit any sin. And what a wonderful life that is. That's what they long for. Like this life that we have. I mean, and look at him, right? He's got that box of cigars next to him. I wonder if they're Cuban. But a bunch of cigars. He's got that coffee, that mug, that coffee kind of mug, high-tech coffee mug. That scenery, which is all fake, of course. That's not his real office. But that fake scenery behind him, and a microphone, and he's broadcasting over the internet to people. All of this is the kind of progress that he despises, he hates. He's living it. But he or at least presents the case that he hates it.
Well, if we are in another industrial revolution, that might help to explain some of the changes that we're seeing, some of the violence we're seeing. So we'll get into the Unabomber's manifesto. But before we get to the best reporter on Antifa, Andy Ngo. First, though, I want to tell you about Armra, the middle of the 20-teens. You would have these .com/Knowles.
I think this is where it ends.
What does the Industrial Revolution have to say about political violence? Well, Kaczynski kind of opens up observing something really weird about Republican politics for the last 30 years. It's ebbed a little bit since the Trump administration and the economic populism. But before that, from the 90s, from the 80s, really, through the middle of the 20-teens, you would have these Republican politicians show up to the conservative group, and they'd say, on the one hand, we need to preserve traditional values and traditional institutions, and we need good old traditional family values. And then on the other hand, they would say, we need creative destruction and unbridled capitalism and innovation and all. And they didn't see that those two things were in conflict.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing about Michael Knowles. He tells it like it is. Yes, they are in conflict. Tradition and all that stuff. Yeah, that's in conflict. Faith and I don't know, family values, whatever the hell those are. That is all in conflict with innovation and capitalism and free trade and unbridled, what do you call it? Unbridled capitalism? Yeah. That is, individualism is in conflict with collectivism. Capitalism and innovation, that's individualism. Tradition, that's collectivism. And those are in conflict. That's what made Republicans so pathetic, what still makes them so pathetic, and why they could never, ever, ever defend capitalism, could never, ever, ever move us towards capitalism. They moved us systematically away from capitalism. So he's absolutely right. And if Ted Kaczynski said this in the manifesto, Ted Kaczynski, absolutely right. But you see, Michael Knowles is saying, yeah, that was the problem, because I'm for the collectivism, I'm for the tradition and family values and all of that stuff. And the consequence of that is, well, we got to be anti-capitalist. We've got to stop all this progress and innovation. God, we're moving towards transhumanism. How can there be anything more evil than that? So he gets it that they're in conflict. At least he's honest about that. At least he's honest about that.
That when you have massive innovation, massive technological change especially, that is necessarily going to upset traditional values and family dynamics.
Yes, absolutely. Good. It's amazing how good it is, right? So the Industrial Revolution made it possible for people to leave their families and get on ships and come and immigrate to the United States and start new families over here. It made it possible for people to move away and not see their families again. It made it possible to people to live based on their own values, not on the values dictated to them by tradition and their religion and their families and whoever else dabbled in their values. They got to make choices for themselves. And the consequence of that, which he never talks about. Nobody, all these critics of capitalism, they never talk about the consequences. The most prosperous, successful, strongest country in human history. Yeah, there's a little bit of political violence. But on the big picture, even the 19th century, tiny as compared to the amount of progress that was being made. I mean, 1220? There were a lot of poor people in 1220. 95% of all people were dirt poor. Yes, they believed in God and they had traditional values. Maybe. But, you know, the core nuclear family, there were no gays. So the gays did what they did in hiding, and that was okay because it was in hiding. So, as long as they don't show it. And and you died building great cathedrals. Beautiful thing. And you stayed poor because the church took all your money. Just beautiful things. Instead of, you went and you built something, you created something, and you raised your kids and you sent them and they got a great education. They became doctors and lawyers and engineers and scientists and entrepreneurs and businessmen. And they built and created and made stuff. How do you even compare life today to life before the Industrial Revolution? The Industrial Revolution is the greatest thing to ever happen to mankind. And he says it's a disaster. It's the greatest thing the human race has ever done. It's taken us to the stars, or at least to the moon so far, and will ultimately take us to the stars. It's so sickening, the right. The right is so sickening. For all of you who thought that objectivists could ally themselves with these idiots, really?
And in many ways, the populism of the Trump era was an answer to that. A populism begun by Donald Trump himself, who was speaking out for workers whose jobs were displaced, whose towns were destroyed, who then became addicted to opioids and further led to family breakdown.
Yeah, these are the conservatives who used to talk about personal responsibility. Now there's no personal responsibility. The opioid crisis that's caused by China, by multinationals moving jobs to China, exactly like the left. It's caused by layoffs. Why didn't these people get into cars and drive to where the jobs are? Oh, because I don't know, personal responsibility. No. God forbid personal responsibility. God forbid taking responsibility for your own life. It is so pathetic. They are leftists draped in religion. But they're complete leftists when it comes to economics. And this is the great alliance that is ultimately going to come out of this. A populist, leftist economic policy wrapped in religion and nationalism. And that's what you're going to get. And that is going to be the ultimate combination. And it's shocking that Americans are buying into this, but they are. They've given up on capitalism and freedom. They're eager for the government to take care of them so that they don't lose their jobs and the families don't break apart and that there's no opioid epidemic, because that's all because of capitalism. Now, it is true. Technological change does create angst. It creates challenges. It's change. And in a sense, it separates adults from those who never grew into adults. It separates those who take responsibility for their own life against those who don't. And those who don't are going to complain and yell and cry. And many of them will resort to violence. Because, that's what you do when you don't know how to deal with the world around you. And you don't have the tool to deal with the world around you. You ignore your own reason. That is what happens. When, from your little child, you are taught not to be responsible for yourself, not to think for yourself, not to do for yourself, but to expect somebody else to come and bail you out. So yeah, technological change creates angst and often leads us towards political violence as a consequence of that angst. Okay, let's see if we go a little bit
from
longer.
him all the way up to J.D. Vance, who is this kind of perfect avatar of that critique of the way societies function for the last.
Yeah, this is their hero now. J.D. Vance is the leftist conservative hero. He is the anti-capitalist, anti-American, socialist hero of the right, and this is who they're pushing for. This is who they're advocating.
30, 40 years. Kaczynski points out. He says, yeah, that was always going to happen, and this change in society was always going to lead to lots and lots of decay that are going to alienate us from nature, that are going to alienate us from society, that are going to treat human beings as machines and commodities.
I mean, this is so Rousseau and Marx. And the whole alienation language is Rousseau and Marx. This is pure leftist garbage. And this is what's missing. What's really, really missing is capitalism, freedom, individualism, personal responsibility. If you teach people for generation after generation, they shouldn't take responsibility. That American way of the 19th century, that American spirit, don't tread on me. No. I need government to protect my job. I need government to protect my income. I need government to protect my children. I need government to protect everything from competition, from those evil immigrants, from all this stuff. Otherwise, there'll be decay. And there'll be decay and transhumanism and a computer on every desk and the internet and AI. Oh, my God. All right. I've had enough of him. This is the right. These are the conservatives. This is the alternative to the left. You got Marxist on the left of you, Marxist on the right of you, or leftist on the left of you, leftist on the right of you, anti-capitalist on the left, anti-capitalist on the right. They just hearken to something different, a different type of anarchy. The right hearkens to an anarchy of tradition, of primitivism. The left hearkens to an anarchy of primitivism. What's the difference really? They both want anarchy, in a sense. They both want going back to the caves, in a sense, going back 1220 or whatever. The left wants to do it in the name of the environment. The right wants to do it in the name of God. But they all want it. They want the same thing. They want the state running the economy. The right wants the state running the economy for the sake of the nation, whatever the hell that means. The left wants the state running the economy for the sake of, I don't know, the proletarian, the oppressed, the minority groups. But they're all the same. They're all the same. This is who you align with. If you align today with the Republican Party, this is who you align with. If you align with Donald Trump, this is who you align with in particular. If you align with J.D. Vance. truly, truly, truly horrible. All right, we have eaten up a lot of time, so we're gonna kind of zip through the rest of the stories. None of these are gonna take us too deep in. I'm gonna show you one graph, one video, but we're gonna go through the news. All right. Notice what unites the left and the right. One more thing. Somebody said haters, but the hate comes from fear. The origin of it all is fear. I mean, what they fear is individualism, both left and right. What they fear is progress. What they fear is technology. What they fear is man achieving great things. What they fear is success. It's not true, Yaron. The left wants communism. The right wants anarchy. The left doesn't want communism. It wants some crazy amalgamation of what is it called? Trump is more communist than most of the left. Look at he wants equity stakes in all the companies. The Republican Party is not center right. The Republican Party is far to the left on economic issues. I mean, Trump wants an equity stake in companies. That is socialism. That's the definition of it. We'll get to the impact that's had on Intel. The left wants socialism in the name of the oppressed, and it wants justice in the name of racial justice. And the right wants oppression. I mean, this right, the Trump right, certainly the Vance right, wants to oppress you in the name of the state and in the name of heritage Americans, which doesn't say in the name of race. They're both racist. So, no, I mean, there's nothing, and again, there's nothing, I mean, what of the left's economic policies does the right reject? I mean, a wealth tax. Right now, the right rejects wealth taxes. My guess is that will change. My guess is that in 4 or 5 years, the right will join the left in advocating for a wealth tax. It's already happened in the UK. Reform is not objecting to a wealth tax. And they want to nationalize industry, just like the right in the United States is trying to nationalize certain aspects of industry. I mean, the Republican Party, I wish was center right, but it's not. It's given up on the center right. It's become populist right, leading towards nationalist Christian right. Listen to Vance. Listen to Rubio. Listen to Rubio. Now, I don't think the right wants anarchy at its most extreme. The right wants a religious dictatorship at its most extreme. That's what it wants. That's what Vance ultimately wants. They want to impose their religious morality on all of us. They want religion everywhere. There is another group that's anarchist, but they will never achieve political power because anarchy is when political power, centralized political power dissipates and, everybody's jockeying for political power and everybody's shooting at everybody. The far right wants absolute control, just like the far left. One wants it in the name of socialism. The other wants it in the name of tradition and religion, but will embrace socialism in order to get it. All right, Iran. I told you yesterday the U.S. has reimposed the blockade on Iranian ports. It started today, this afternoon, I guess. It also launched new strikes on Iran. Same tit-for-tat strikes, same thing. Air defense systems, ports, and a few. The same stuff that they've been bombing for the last week. They bombed again. There seems to be an endless supply of these things on the Iranian side. Then Trump, you remember yesterday I told you he wants 20% fee on cargo through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, somebody told him that that was illegal. That's the whole case they made against the Iranians doing it. And that, that shipping lanes are being open and free, and the Americans have been committed to that for a long time, and he really shouldn't do it. I'm sure the Saudis and the UAEs and the Qataris and the Kuwaitis all called him up panicking about the 20%. What the hell are you talking about? So what he's done is he said, no, I'm waiving the 20% fee on cargo through the Straits of Hormuz. And instead, I'm going to ask all these Gulf states to make investment deals in the United States. And of course, they're happy to make investment deals in the United States. Nobody's ever going to call them on it. Nobody's ever going to actually force them to do it. They can say, we're going to invest $55 trillion in the U.S. And Trump will go, oh, so cool. I'll give you whatever you want. That is so amazing. And it will never happen, and nobody will ever call them on it. So, the Straits of Hormuz will be open to the extent that the American Navy is able to keep them open. Not clear whether they are willing to commit the resources to doing that yet, and whether they have a plan on how to do that. They are blocking all ships in and out of Iran. And we will see in the next few days, right? What exactly the United States is willing or not willing to do in order to keep shipping in the Straits of Hormuz flowing. Trump did say that the U.S. will hit Iranian power plants and bridges next week unless the Iranians get to the table and negotiate. These are the people, he said, constantly lie and never stick to an agreement. But why not? Let's try it one more time. Let's have a negotiation. So he's still on the negotiation path. I've told you from the beginning, there's only one legit outcome for this war, and that is regime change. Legit, complete regime change, which constitutes unconditional surrender. Trump is not thinking like that. He's not advocating for that. He's not trying to do that. They're sanctioning people. They're freezing Iranian assets. I thought all the Iranian assets were already frozen. And in the meantime, Iran is firing at Kuwait. It's firing at other countries. It's just a disaster. And it's not clear what the Trump administration is hoping to get out of all of this. It's continued blockade and hope we can help some ships sneak out of the Gulf. And in the meantime, gas prices go up, oil prices go up, economic pressure globally on Trump to cut a deal. What does he do? Who knows? Who knows? All right. Yeah, I mean, he came out with a statement today. He says, oil is flowing like never before thanks to the awesome power of the United States military. No, oil is flowing like never before because of the oil and gas industry in the United States, which has unbelievable capacity and jacked up production in the name of in the face of higher prices in order to make a profit. So oil is flowing like never before because of the little bit of capitalism we have and because of the profit motive. The profit motive is what is driving oil prices up. He says, a special salute to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, because of them and all members of the most powerful military anywhere in the world. How about using it? By far, the Strait of Hormuz is open to all ship traffic except for Iran. Not true. Almost no ships are traveling through the Straits of Hormuz right now. Almost none. And that is because of their lying, violent, malicious leadership, which is taking them down the path of total destruction. We will therefore have a full blockade, but only on ships coming to and from Iranian ports, on carrying anything have to do with Iranian cargo. Based on highly productive conversations with Middle East leaders, I've decided to replace the 20% United States reimbursement fee with trade and investment deals that various Gulf states will be making into the United States. Complete lie and made up. He realized that a 20% was never going to happen. Those investments will be massive, but at the same time, extraordinarily good for them and their future. As everyone is aware, we have the largest dollar investment into the United States of any country in history. Well, yeah, the United States is the only country in history that can get dollar investment into the United States. So that is a sentence somebody should have edited. But then again, the people who read this, his followers, are not particularly concerned with the grammar and the truth of anything, particularly the truth of anything that he says. Let's see. Yes, these new investments will make the number even larger. We will see factories, plants, and equipment point to the United States at historic level, and we will create additional millions of high-paying jobs, American jobs, not other people's jobs. America is winning again, winning like never before. The days of Iran killing hundreds of thousands of people, including 52,000 protesters, are over, and most importantly, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Iranians are still killing protesters. I mean, they're killing the people they captured. They're executing them. Iran hasn't changed one iota. And if anything, they're more likely to get a nuclear bomb, not less. So, In the meantime, Donald Trump did actually notify Congress that a new war has started with Iran. A war with no objective, other than to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was already open before the previous war was engaged in. So, all right. We talked about ICE yesterday. We talked about ICE last week. Second killing in 2 weeks, this time of somebody who was here legally, had papers, and was shot again during a stop. But this time, ICE is not claiming that he tried to run anybody over. This time, he was a danger because he was, I guess, driving away, and they shot him while driving away. It's just horrible. It seems like all this pressure, all this media, all this, all the attention that we, all of us, and everybody has been giving ICE is working, because ICE today announced that they've instructed their people to immediately cease most vehicle stops during immigration enforcement operations nationwide, except for operations targeting the most egregious criminal aliens. Now remember, most of their catches, most of their deportation catches have been through traffic stops, through stopping automobiles. So this comes after 2 people were killed by ICE in shootings in Texas and Maine in the last week, and incidents that began as traffic stops. DHS alleges one of these incidents was a ramming attempt. No evidence of that so far. Now, supposedly this is only temporary until ICE officers, get this, until ICE officers receive new training on vehicle stops. Yeah. They're not qualified to do them. Police train for this. There's a procedure, and there's the rule of law that applies to how the police deal with you and me. Doesn't apply to ICE. They consider themselves above the law. And because they're dealing with so-called illegal immigrants, they don't have any rights, supposedly. So this is going to create a lot of frustration among ICE officers. Good. After all, many of ICE's arrests begin at vehicle stops when they find and follow a target. But yeah, I mean, I guess even the Trump administration is fed up with the incompetence of these ICE agents. I mean, it really is horrific, right? The behavior of ICE. And how they've conducted themselves, the lack of training, the lack of abiding by basic policing codes of how to interact with people. And look, they're hiring people really, really fast. They're recruiting. Supposedly the shooting in Maine was done by a brand new recruit to ICE who got very little training. And it's probably a thug, because then they don't care who they take in. I mean, what an opportunity. If you're kind of a right-wing hater of immigrant, thuggish human being, and ICE is saying, hey, we're paying a lot of money to come and work for us, and you get to beat up on immigrants who you hate anyway. I mean, who's not going to go and take that job? So, yeah, I'm glad that they are backing off. I'm glad they're backing off at least from from stopping motorists in their cars. I think that'll make things a lot better. Hopefully, it'll also reduce the number of people they arrest. It's not going to solve the problem because ICE is still out there and it's got a massive budget. And government agencies with massive budgets never go away. They morph, they adjust, they figure out how to supposedly do their job or use the skill set, the thuggish skill set that they have. All right, let's see. Here's the thing about immigration, right? Clearly, immigration is the biggest political issue for Trump. It's the thing he ran on. It's the thing that got him elected. It's the thing that killed the Biden administration. But even in the first Trump presidency in 2016, this is the thing that got him elected. People are fed up with immigrants. They're fed up with illegal immigrants in particular. They blame them for a lot of our troubles. Trump did a lot to help them blame for a lot of our troubles. So you'd think, right, that the top priority for this administration would be reforming our immigration system, scrapping the crazy immigration system that we have, but putting together something better, something that reflects their values more. Stopping, closing the border, yeah, that worked. They got that. They got some credit for that, from their voters at least. But then what? Here's the thing. Trump has done nothing, literally nada, to actually promote immigration reform, to actually pass a bill in Congress for a different immigration status. Now, you could say, oh, the Democrats, they won't pass anything. He could try. He could make it an election issue. He can point out the Democrats that held it up and didn't allow it to pass and make it a big deal. But you see, Trump doesn't really care about immigration. He cares about it only in that it serves a political purpose. But he doesn't want to reform immigration. He doesn't want, and he doesn't care about Congress. He doesn't care about the long run. So, there's no real reform. No comprehensive immigration reform, which is what they should try to do. And embarrass Democrats who won't sign for it. Some of them will be worried because the fact is that a majority of Americans believe in immigration reform, sadly, along the lines closer to Trump than to me. Why doesn't he use that? Because he doesn't care. He just doesn't care. And what he really wants, what Stephen Miller really wants, is just to close the border and not let people in. Legal, illegal, doesn't matter to them. They just don't want people in. Unless, of course, you're Europeans, in particular white South Africans, running away from supposedly violence against you. Then doors are wide open. We love you then. It's interesting because, Trump is fighting with the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. about their interpretation of American history. And look, their interpretation of American history is rabid leftist, so it's really, really bad. But here's an example of something they're really making a big deal out of. According to Smithsonian, the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, right, was racist. It was intended to keep Chinese out because Americans, and particularly new American immigrants from Europe, didn't like the Chinese. They didn't want their labor competition, and they didn't like them. And the Trump administration is fighting the Smithsonian over this. No. That wasn't racist. Not at all. It was. They were taking the jobs, and these were real grievances. Only against Chinese people, by the way, but real grievances. I mean, it turns out that a huge number of Chinese went back to China because of this. The Chinese population, the Asian population in the United States would be significantly higher if not for the Chinese Exclusion Act. And, the huge anti-Chinese movements all over California. It started in California. But, the Trump administration wants to rewrite history. Rewrite history. Now, the left has already rewritten a bunch of history, but what we don't need is the left and the right fighting over which version of history rather than seeking truth. That's what they don't do, seek truth. The Chinese Exclusion Act reduced the Chinese labor supply by 64%, produced massive negative effects. Negative effects included reducing white male labor supply by 28%, and whites on average moving from higher paying jobs to lower paying jobs. The lower labor supply caused a slowdown in growth in the western parts of the United States. Chinese exclusion probably reduced total manufacturing output by 62%, reduced the number of manufacturing establishments by 54% to 69%. Yep, immigration exclusion is bad economic policy. Immigration exclusion is bad economic policy, whether it's driven by xenophobia and racism or driven by other stuff. All right, that was immigration. Quickly, antitrust. All right, we're way behind here. All right, but you guys have paid into the third hour, so we're in great shape. Right? You remember we talked about a few months ago the deal where Paramount was buying Warner Brothers after Netflix tried to buy Warner Brothers, but the Trump administration basically said, it appears, the Trump administration basically said, we're not going to approve the Netflix Warner Brothers deal. We will approve a Paramount Warner Brothers because Paramount is run by, the number one, I think the largest donor to the Trump campaign, which is Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison's son, but the money is Larry Ellison's money. So we're going to allow the Paramount to buy Warner Brothers for $110 billion. And basically the Justice Department said, yeah, don't look here. There's nothing here. So whereas most Justice Departments would have at least looked at this. Now, I'm against antitrust. I don't believe they should. But they said Trump basically gave them a signal that this was supposed to be approved, and it was. Paramount also secured approval for the deal from 24 national and international regulatory agencies, claiming that the deal would expand output and benefit workers. Well, today, 11 states, including California, sued in federal court to block Paramount's the deal based on antitrust. The attorney generals alleged the merger would, quote, raise prices, reduce consumer choice, and cost many Americans their jobs. They claimed that the combined entity would control 27% of theatrical film distribution and basic cable markets in violation of the Clayton Act. Clayton Act is the follow-on act to the Sherman Act that kind of defined more clearly what antitrust constituted. So that lawsuit is going to go ahead. In addition, the Writers Guild of America is suing Paramount and Warner Brothers, alleging the $110 million merger would harm competition in film and television writing. So the deal is not a done deal yet. It has to go to court. It will be dealt with in court. Now, I don't know what happens in the meantime. My guess is the deal goes through, and then I guess if they find against the deal, then they split it up again. Paramount has to spin out Warner Brothers, but this saga is going to continue. For a while. All right. Interesting. All right. Next story. Intel. So as you know, the Trump administration has taken an equity stake in Intel and has basically provided Intel with downside protection. Basically, Intel is not going to go bankrupt because the government is going to bail them out whenever needed. Indeed, Intel's stock has quadrupled since the government took that position because the market believes that the government will do everything they can to keep Intel alive and thriving. Now, how can they affect Intel's thriving? Well, for example, one thing they can do is when Apple comes to them and asks for a reprieve from the 100% tariffs on semiconductor components, then Trump can say, okay, Apple, I'll give you the reprieve, but in exchange, I want you to buy Intel chips made in America. Not all your chips, but I want you to sign a deal with Intel to buy their chips. Now, at the time, when Trump actually made this request of Apple, request with the gun to their forehead, Intel was struggling mightily after being kind of shut out of the AI boom, and Apple having abandoned Intel a few years ago for their own chip designs that were being manufactured by TSMC in Taiwan. But now the Trump administration is Intel's largest shareholder. And the Trump administration controls the fate of Apple. Tariffs. So it can matchmake. This is the kind of government-run, so-called markets that China engages in, that Japan engaged in the past, that South Korea has engaged in the past. It creates massive market distortions. It reduces competitiveness. But this is exactly what's going on. And you want to tell me that the right is not socialist? This is socialism. This is the government taking equity positions, choosing winners and losers, and then using that and the rest of the leverage they get from having a gun pointed at every company potentially in America, using it to benefit, to create winners, the companies that they want, and to create losers are the companies that they don't like. Woke, this is, we worried about the left doing this, and we're worried about, rent control. This is, in many sense, worse than rent control. This is destroying the one area in which the United States had relative freedom, tech. And the government now stepping into it and creating all the disincentives or destructive incentives and the cronyism and market distortions that government interference always has. We're taking the most important industry in the United States today that is driving our economy, that is leading our economy, and we're putting it under the thumb of government. Not through the regulatory process. Who needs regulation when you can just get a seat at the board, where you can just have equity and you become the largest the United States is the largest shareholder at Intel. Intel listens to its largest shareholder. All right, let's see. What was that? Where do we go? Oh, woke. Woke is a graph. I want to show you this graph. Okay, this is a graph. This is DEI commitments in corporate security disclosures filed with the SEC. Right? And you can see that these DEI kind of disclosures started in the early 2010s, and they slowly increased, and then they went, exponential during COVID and in the period after COVID under the Biden administration, and really they've just collapsed since the election. This is a post by Paul Graham, and he says, to me, this seems a trailing indicator. Most other measures of wokeness take off well before 2019 and peak in 2020-21, but the shape, that's what a moral fashion looks like. Yes, this is a moral fashion. This is where Everybody's virtue signaling to everybody else. This is the right thing to do. We have to stick it in the financial statements. We have to you have to let the world know. We have to do all these things. And, for those of you who've forgotten, the late teens and early COVID era, God, everybody was on the DEI thing. I mean, racial identity was at the forefront of everything. So, I thought I changed that. All right, so, I thought I'd show you this graph. Peak woke. Now, look, a lot of it is they changed the name. But some companies have fired their HR people that brought them to woke. There's real change going on. And there's a lot less talk about woke, about DEI and woke more generally. But the graph is pretty illustrative and pretty dramatic. And I don't think we're going to get back to those numbers. Again, they'll be in the background. People will still be doing some of this stuff, but not quite at the same level. And it won't be like this is virtue, because that requires advocacy, that requires signaling, that requires, and I think that's gone. I think that we're over. And then the question is, what is going to be the next moral panic? But this was a real moral panic. All right, so that is that. And what else did I? Oh, quick story about Hong Kong. Hong Kong. Up until 2020, freest country in the world, freest economy in the world, and then in 2020, while everybody was busy with COVID, China basically took it over, and has controlled Hong Kong with a much tighter fist since 2020. Well, just as a great illustration of the end of Hong Kong capitalism, of Hong Kong liberty, of Hong Kong free markets, Hong Kong just launched a 2-month public consultation for its first ever 5-year plan for economic and social development that would apply from 2026 to 2030 and would align the city's economic goals with mainland China's 15th 5-year plan, while preserving, in quotation mark, its free market principles. So just saying 5-year plan and free market principles in the same sentence is a big no-no. It's a big, that that can't be. That doesn't work. It doesn't work. So sad. Really, 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 really sad. Hong Kong was one of my favorite places on planet Earth to go visit. Stunning, amazing, dynamic, full of energy, skyscrapers, beautiful, just an amazing place. An amazing, amazing place. And and that all because of their free markets. And much of that, I fear, is going to be put under the thumb of, Chinese regulators, Chinese central planners, under the thumb of a 5-year plan. A 5-year plan. All right, let's see. Bezos. Oh, I want to show you this video. This is part of a feel-good portion of human achievements. All right, let's watch this video. It's short, like 1 minute. It's 1 minute.
I sometimes wish that there were a, and maybe you can do this, Andrew, or maybe the Washington Post will do this, but somebody needs to make a list where they rank people by how much wealth they've created for other people. And so instead of the Forbes list, it ranks you by your own wealth. So, Amazon's market cap is 2.3 trillion today. I own about, 200 billion-ish of it. So if you take 2.3 billion and subtract out the piece I kept from myself, then, I've created something like 2.1 trillion of wealth for other people. That should put me pretty high on some kind of list. And that's a better list. How much wealth have you created for other people? Right. People like Jensen at NVIDIA, he's going to be very high on that list. And that would be a pretty cool list. Somebody should do that list.
I think that is a very cool list.
And you know, this sounds altruistic, right? It sounds a little altruistic. You know, I've done it for others. But he's not apologizing for his own 200 billion. He's just saying, at the same time as I created 200 billion for myself, there's $2.1 trillion out there of wealth in the pockets of other people that didn't exist before I created Amazon. And it's absolutely true. The economists have estimated that, you know, of the amount of value that an entrepreneur like Jeff Bezos creates, they get to keep, that is their reward for the values that they're creating, is about 2% of the total value created. Now here, this is just the value of the company. It's not the value to all the consumers. Here, he's got about 10% of the total value created, right? 200 billion out of 2.1 trillion is, I think, if my math is right, about 10%. But how much value has Bezos created for me and for you and for everybody else's whose life is better? The 200 billion is a drop in the ocean as compared to how much he's created for all of us. So Amazon has probably created over $10 trillion of value, probably a lot more than that. Jeff Bezos has 200 billion. And if you look at it that way, it's not that much. Not that much. So I still wish Bezos was even more forceful, but at least he's trying to make a point. He's trying to defend himself. He's trying to point out the massive value that he and entrepreneurs like him, he mentions NVIDIA, Jensen and NVIDIA, people like that, the amount of value that they have created in the world, which is just, unbelievable. It's the modern world that we live in. It's a modern world created by entrepreneurs like him. That's where it comes from. All this wealth we have around us didn't just pop out of existence. And it wasn't the workers who made it. The workers got paid based on their level of contribution. So, yeah. Good for Jeff Bezos being on the road, basically making these points and trying, even when it's flawed, but really making an effort to articulate the case in defense of his own wealth. All right, let me just pull up. Let me just pull this up. Why am I not able to? That is weird. I can't get to the webpage where I had the positive stories. Let me see if I can get it on my phone. What's that? All right. A few again, amazing stuff continues to happen in the field of cancer treatment, of new medications. So the FDA just approved a new targeted breast cancer drug, which dramatically increases survivability and extends life. And this is for women who have kind of stage 4 and the worst. Nothing else has helped, and yet this extends life significantly and provides more options. At the same time, there's a new drug that is showing promise with rectal cancer. And it is now in kind of mid-stage trials, but the indications are that it could extend or treat rectal cancer. And then there's a drug out. Somebody sent me the story earlier. There's a big trial being launched right now of a new drug for Alzheimer's disease, which is going to be given to people before they get the Alzheimer's, people who are highly susceptible to it. You know, Alzheimer's, at least for some people, is a genetic issue. If you have certain genes, you are more susceptible to Alzheimer's. One of the reasons you should all get genetically tested so you know whether you're susceptible or not, and therefore whether you should get on a drug like this. So the idea is to give these people the drug before they show symptoms and see, compared to a placebo, if it has a real impact on reducing the probability of developing Alzheimer's or delaying it completely or eliminating it as a threat is significant. Alzheimer's is probably the biggest health issue, you know, affecting old age that we have today. And there's no really good treatments, but there's a lot of kind of on the cusp, very close breakthroughs. So this is a big trial on one of the drugs that they're very hopeful about. We'll see if it is the breakthrough everybody expects it is. And what else did I see here? Yeah, a lot of investment in semiconductors. TSMC is reporting its fifth straight quarter of record earnings. So they're doing phenomenally well because of their whole AI revolution and the building out of the data centers. So AI, I think the biggest beneficiaries, economic beneficiaries of the AI revolution are going to be companies like TSMC and NVIDIA, the people who sell the picks and the shovels to the gold miners. I'm not sure the software companies are going to be the real beneficiaries long term. And then another semiconductor company called Tower, which is actually an Israeli semiconductor company, just announced a $3 billion chip manufacturing expansion in Japan. And they are targeting something called silicon photonics, which uses light to move data faster between AI chips, and silicon germanium technology for faster, more efficient, and effective devices. So again, a lot of investment in new semiconductor technologies out there, and there's going to be increased competition, but there's so much profit, there's so much money to be made here. There's plenty of room for lots of players to participate. Yeah, I mean, science, technology keeps chugging along, and then I also got a lot of crime stories, but we've already covered those. I mean, again, crime is massively declining in the United States. Go figure. In spite of the fact that Michael Knowles claimed that political violence is increasing, maybe it is, regular violent crime is massively decreasing. Maybe because of transhumanism or capitalism, or I don't know, whatever ails our society today, somehow is also reducing crime. All right, everybody, that is the news for this Tuesday, July 14th, the day that Spain beat France in the semifinals of the World Cup. All right, let us turn to our super chat. Before that, I'll remind you, we're only $124 away from our third hour goal, which would be just amazing if we could reach that. That would be really exciting. So anybody who wants to participate, please consider doing so. You can use a sticker, which is just a trade value for value. Thank you, John, for the sticker, and Exit, and Mary Aline. And who else did the stickers? Almost everybody did questions today. Very little money came in from stickers. It's all questions. All right. I'll also remind you that you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com, and PayPal, and become a monthly supporter, a regular monthly supporter. That would be really cool. That is the best way, ultimately, to support the show. So those of you particularly who are not live right now or not on YouTube, just hop on a Patreon, create an account, search Yaron Brook Show and make a contribution, and then it just comes out of your credit card every month at whatever amount you would like it to be. For those of you doing $10, you get the audio only, the podcast version of the show without any advertising. And those of you who do $250, you get a one-on-one with me once every 3 months. $500, you get one-on-one with me every month, and a bunch of other perks. By the way, we achieved our $15,000 goal for the production of the documentary. So thank you to everybody who participated. Got a lot of people doing $1,000. So thank you to all of you. But then a bunch of 500s and 75s and 100s and all 250s. So thank you to everybody who participated and got us to the goal super fast. I mean, it's basically less than a week since I announced it, and we're already at the goal. So thank you. And I will keep you updated on the progress I'm making with the documentary when we film it in September in London, and then when we produce it and distribute it and all of that. What else? Yes, Ayn Rand Institute is a sponsor of this show. It is holding a conference in Austin, Texas, September 11th to 13th. Some of leading objectivist intellectuals will be there, teaching courses and interacting. Very interactive, lots of time to socialize and to hang out with some of the intellectuals out there. And the Institute is offering scholarships, very generous scholarships, I might add, to anybody under the age of 35. I think it includes 35 and under. You can get information about those scholarships at aynrand.org/YBS, aynrand.org/YBS. Check out the Austin conference, Austin, Texas, September 11th to 13th. Austin is becoming the center of the universe for objectivism, so please consider it. Actually, in the same weekend, there will be the groundbreaking ceremony for the new building in Austin. So there'll be a lot going on that weekend in Austin. So many of you should consider going there, even non-students, and hanging out. It'll be a very celebratory, fun, and lots of different events around the groundbreaking and the conference and everything else. So great place to be. Austin, Texas, September. The weather's starting to get nice. Yeah, it's very, very cool. You should definitely do it. All right, let's see. Alex Epstein is the #1 authority in the world on all things energy, electricity, fossil fuels, and environmental regulations, and also now data centers, AI data centers. He's become a huge defender of AI data centers. He's writing about it. He's speaking about it. So you should check him out. Check out what he has to say about all these things. Check out his progress and the influence he's having on the Trump administration. And all of that is accessible on alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com. And finally, Defenders of Capitalism is a website dedicated to defending capitalism from political and philosophical basis, and of course economic, and run by Michael Williams, and with contributions from myself. And this is a great resource on capitalism. This material is used to teach capitalism at the leadership program of the Rockies. You can check out information about that as well. And you should sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter. You won't regret it. Okay, and what else did I have? That's it. Those are our sponsors. Let's jump in to the Super Chat. We've $62 away from the 3-hour goal for today's show. Let's start with $100 Canadian. We've got two Canadians doing $100. That's amazing. AJ the Dragon. Emergence question. Why assume morality emerges from intelligence? My hypothesis is that morality requires a self-maintaining being with existence at stake. Current AI can optimize, but has no welfare or survival of its own. Where does the system model break down? So I don't understand the question, because I don't understand the alternative. What does it mean, assume morality emerges from intelligence? Who argues that? Who claims that? I don't know who claims that. Certainly objectivism doesn't claim that. Ayn Rand doesn't claim that. I mean, morality requires a being with an alternative, the alternative of existence to non-existence. And once the being and a non-automatic means of existence, that is a real choice, and where real effort is required in order to live versus alternative to exist versus alternative of death or non-existence. And in the face of that, once existence is chosen, one needs a guide on how to exist, on what to do in order to sustain life, what to do in order to thrive as a living being. Animals don't need morality because their values are automatic. They know what to pursue automatically. Human beings need morality because then they don't know. They don't have the programming. So once a human being decides they want to live, and an overwhelming majority of us does, now they need guidance. How do I live? What do I do? What choices do I make? What values do I pursue? What virtues do I live by in order to achieve those values? And that's the role of morality, to explain that. Now look, AI can't have morality because it's not alive. It's not conscious. It's a mirage of consciousness. It's a mirage of life. And therefore AI doesn't have values, and it doesn't have the fundamental choice of existence or non-existence. It has, you can unplug it or plug it, but there's no consciousness that disappears. There's no death. There's no death. So no, morality does not emerge from intelligence. I mean, it emerges from intelligence in a sense that you need intelligence in order to figure out how, as a human being, you should live. But at least for now, morality only applies to human beings. It does not apply to computers. We don't know of the existence of aliens, and it does not apply to animals. It applies to human beings because we have free will, and because we don't have the programming, we don't have the automatic knowledge of how we should live, how to actually conduct ourselves in order to thrive or survive. All right, I can't remember when I last thanked, I think I thanked John, but I don't think I thanked Jeremy for the sticker. Thank you, Jeremy, really appreciate it. Let's see, so hopefully I answered that, AJ. Jamie from Canada. Some say U.S. canning Mossadegh in 1953, this is the Iranian prime minister in 1953, ultimately led to IRGC, Hamas, Hezbollah, funding of terrorism. That Western involvement in the Middle East destabilized the region. And today's problems are partly, mostly U.S. fault. Your thoughts, any good books on this? Thank you, love the show. I mean, this is a complicated issue, and we'd have to get into a deep dive into the history, which I intend to do with Nikos at some point. And there's not a lot of good, authoritative history books about this stuff. But there are a lot of fallacies around the 1953 revolution. And there certainly are a lot of fallacies around this idea of Western involvement in the Middle East destabilized the region. I mean, let's do just a little bit of history. Most of the Middle East, not Iran, but most of the Middle East, was part of the Ottoman Empire. And so the Ottoman Empire ruled over most of the Middle East, not Egypt, for example, and not big chunks of Saudi Arabia, and not Iran, but the rest. And during different periods of time, because it was in constant war, the Ottoman Empire expanded and shrunk and expanded and shrunk and expanded and shrunk. At some point, it was actually on the verge of conquering Vienna and taking control over all of Central Europe. So I don't know why that is considered stable. Now, World War I happened. And during World War I, the Ottoman Empire could have stayed out of the war. The war was between basically the French and British and versus the Germans. And the Ottoman Empire didn't have to get involved in that war, but it chose to get involved in the war. And it chose to get involved in the war on the side of the Germans, which happened to be the losing side. And as part of that war, Western countries conquered the Middle East from the Ottoman Empire. And that included what today is Iraq and Jordan and Israel and parts of Saudi Arabia that the Ottoman Empire had conquered. You can see Lawrence of Arabia tells part of that story. So now what are they supposed to do? They conquered the place. So rather than stay and turn the Middle East into a colony of the West, they actually, created states. There's never been a Jordan. There's never been really an Iraq. There was never really a Syria. It was a province of the Roman Empire, a province of the Ottoman Empire, but not a state. There was never really a Lebanon. There certainly wasn't a Israel or Palestine. There were, again, since biblical times. And, even Saudi Arabia, there's no such thing. They created states in a place where they had never had states. They'd only had empires. The Abbasid Empire, other Islamic empires, all they were empires. So I don't know what this Western involvement is. Ottomans decided to get into war. Ottomans were fighting the West for 1,000 years. Then they decided to get into a war which was none of their business, and they lost. And they lost a lot of territory. And then the Western countries did kind of, in a sense, the responsible thing by giving the people who lived in these parts their own countries, and then, at least to some extent, leaving them alone. Now, the second thing the Western involvement did in the Middle East, evil Westerners, they discovered oil. And they gave oil value because the Industrial Revolution was happening in the West, not in the Middle East. So Western companies discovered oil in Saudi Arabia and in Iran and in Iraq and all the Gulf states and all over the place. They discovered oil. That was Western companies. What were they supposed to do? And that oil should have been the property of those Western companies who had discovered it under contracts. And then these Middle Eastern countries abandoned the contracts, threw them out, nationalized oil, and took over all the facilities that were built by Western companies. Who destabilized that? They could have kept the Western companies and shared the spoils, but no, they chose to kick out Western companies. And they chose to nationalize it and take control. Who destabilized who in this case? And indeed, it was Western companies that created this resource, discovered it, created it, refined it, and it's the West that gave it value because it's the West and where it was used. So why is the West destabilizing the Middle East? And when it comes to Iran, it isn't true that the United States is the one that overthrew Mossadegh. Now, Mossadegh had been involved in nationalizing the oil in Iran, oil that was owned by American and British companies. He was also clearly going to align the Iran with the Soviet Union, with communism. And the Shah of Iran at the time, there was a Shah and a prime minister, and the Shah of Iran didn't like him. The Shah wanted him gone. And the Shah organized a coup, which, yes, the Americans and the British supported. But it was an Iranian coup against an Iranian prime minister. It wasn't an American coup, in spite of what they tell you. It wasn't. It was an Iranian coup. It was the Shah's coup. And he got rid of this prime minister, as Shahs do, kings do in a constitutional monarchy. And he replaced him with his own guy, with a different prime minister. And the United States supported the Shah. While he initially returned the oil to the Americans, he later nationalized it himself. But generally, he was aligned for geopolitical reasons because he was not going to go with the Soviets. He supported American interests, and America supported him until, of course, he was overthrown by the Islamists. So the whole idea that this is all the U.S. fault is just ahistoric. There's no parallel universe where the West doesn't get involved in the Middle East. It's not possible for the West not to get involved in the Middle East because the Middle East constantly get involved with the West, and because the West brought many values to the Middle East. Oil, which they still live off of. How about the Middle East take responsibility for themselves? How about the Iranians take responsibility for their own history? How about all these countries take responsibility for their own actions or inactions, for their own oppression of their own people? So, no. The mess of the Middle East is a making of Islam. It's the making of the people in the Middle East. It's the making of the dictators that have ruled the Middle East since they were liberated from the Ottoman Empire, another dictatorship. Now note, if the West is to blame for anything, it's to blame for the fact that when rich Arabs sent their kids to study in the West, primarily to study and to learn why the West was so successful, what they were taught in universities like Paris and Berlin was socialism and fascism. And then when they went back to their countries, just like the Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge to Cambodia, when they went back to their countries, they established socialist, fascist regimes. You can blame the West for that, but that's generally the battle of ideas. Yes, bad ideas in the West have done a lot of harm to the West and to the rest of the world as well. But no, blaming everything on a coup in 1953 is bizarre. There's so many other things that were going on. There's so many things that could have happened. If Mossadegh had stayed prime minister, what would have happened then? He would have conflicted at some point with the Shah. There would have been some kind of conflict. If Mossadegh had aligned Iran with the Soviet Union, would that have brought freedom to the Middle East? Would that have made Iran a free democratic place? The Islamists would still have revolted against it. They hate communism. So no, it's just such a silly blame America for everything attitude that so many people on the left and among libertarians have. All right, Harper Campbell, $50. Thank you, Jamie, for the 100 Canadian. Harper Campbell says, you don't like the concept of IQ, but how would you classify a genius outside of using the IQ they were born with? What makes a Newton or a Rand? Yes, they were devoted to discovery, but so were many thinkers who couldn't produce what they could. Yeah, I mean, they had higher intelligence. I'm just saying IQ, from what I understand, is not a particularly good measure of that intelligence. And it's not enough to explain Ayn Rand or Newton. There are plenty of people born with very high IQs who don't achieve a fraction of what Rand or Newton or Einstein or any of these people achieved. So it's not, intelligence is not enough. IQ is measuring something, but I'm not sure it's measuring intelligence, qua intelligence, the full scope of intelligence. It's just not a useful measure. So what is? I don't know. And I don't really care. I've never, I interact with people, and some people I value it as, yeah, that guy's smart. But I'm not interested in how, in their IQ. I'm not interested in quantifying it. Are they smart? Are they honest? Are they hardworking? Are they entrepreneurial? Are they ambitious? Those are the things that matter to me. And then, of course, are they honest? Do they have integrity? Those are the things that matter to me. Somebody's IQ literally has zero value in my mind. I've never checked my own IQ. I don't care. I'm not interested in what the number is. I've never been curious about it. It doesn't mean anything to me. I've never asked my friends what their IQ is. I know some of my friends are really, really intelligent. Some are less intelligent. So what? I mean, they're friends, so they have values that are meaningful to me. That's all that matters to me. And if I was hiring people, I might, give them some kind of test to measure their abilities as they relate to the job that I have in mind. And some of those tests might be tests of intelligence. But I don't believe that one number captures that, like IQ tests do. And I don't believe it's that important in the context of everything else. All right, thank you. Hopper also asks, another $50, thank you. Why hasn't there been another Einstein or Newton? I don't think the mixed economy has drowned them out because we have Bezos and Musk. Has the content corruption of physics caused a brain drain? The best minds are no longer entering physics. I don't know. Remember that for every Bezos and Musk, we had a J.D. Rockefeller and a Carnegie and a Mellon and a J.P. Morgan. So even during the period of Einstein, you still had Bezos and Musk. So, I don't think Bezos and Musk are necessarily smarter than J.P. Morgan. But, I don't know. Maybe physics has reached a point where, because of the corrupt philosophy, it's very difficult to make advances. And therefore, even if you get geniuses going into the field, they can't move. They get stuck on string theory or some random thing in physics, and they don't actually make any dramatic advances that are real because the philosophy doesn't allow it. That's a possibility. I don't know enough about physics to be able to tell. A lot of geniuses are going into, I think, biological science, and that's why we're getting a lot of breakthroughs there. I don't think more geniuses are going now into business than did before, but maybe because it's much more lucrative today, maybe because it's much sexier in terms of the startup culture. So it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell what exactly is going on, why we don't have. I mean, I'm more interested in knowing why we don't have a Michelangelo and why we don't have a Mozart and why we don't have a Beethoven, why those people don't exist. And there I think it's the culture. It's the culture. Could that also be what's impacting the sciences? Yeah, definitely. The culture could be preventing the geniuses from breakthroughs and from even going into the field. Tommy on the chat is sometimes such an idiot. Sorry, Tommy, but that's just the reality. Physics geniuses are building the rockets in Tehran, beating the U.S. I'll give you points for being funny, because that is a funny statement. You need geniuses to build the stupid rockets that the Iranians are using, the dumb rockets that they use. All right, Andrew, the right feels the left's bias. The right feels the left's bias in elevating America's faults over its virtues, but is unable to expose it. Trump's response to the Smithsonian is to deny an historical fact rather than contextualize it. But the latter requires abstract thought. Absolutely. They know that something's wrong with what the Smithsonian is doing, but they can't actually name it, they can't define it, they can't categorize it. They also don't want to admit to themselves that they might be racist themselves, so they have to couch everything in other terms. So yeah, it's absolutely, you'd have to really think, and you'd have to have a theory of history, and you'd have to have a theory of America, and you'd have to be willing to acknowledge its faults. Slavery, for example, Jim Crow laws, for example, the Chinese Exclusion Act, for example. But they can't. They have to be blind patriots and ignore the faults. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. All right, $20 questions. We've got a bunch of those. Let me get a sip of water here, because. All right, not your average algorithm is asking whether reality exists an honest question, or an attempt to destroy man's confidence in his own mind, a way to inculcate neuroticism and schizophrenia? Well, it depends on who's asking the question. If you're a teenager starting to think about the world and starting to kind of investigate your philosophical whatever, and you entertain the idea, what does it mean to ask the question if reality really exists? And yeah, but if I ask that question, what does it mean that I am asking it? Do I exist? If I'm asking it, then I at least exist. So something in reality exists. I mean, you go by that path, so it can be an honest question. But if you're a sophisticated, well-educated, well-read philosopher, then yeah, it's either massive evasion or an active attempt at destruction, at nihilism. But I wouldn't say that anybody who ever asks, does reality exist, is dishonest and a nihilist. But I certainly think the more sophisticated you are, the more, yeah, that's probably what's going on. All right, not your average algorithm again. John Stossel just released a video about nuclear power making a big comeback. Alex Epstein seems to have been very effective in relatively short period of time, or is nuclear power being deregulated to fuel AI data centers? Well, I think both. I think Alex has been very effective. I think there's broadly been a movement, even among some environmentalists, not a lot, but some environmentalists, but there's broadly been a movement to resurrect nuclear energy because it's clean vis-a-vis CO2. And I do think a lot of people are pushing for using it for data centers. Now, I think to say it's making a big comeback is an exaggeration. This stuff moves so slowly. If it is making a comeback, it's just at the very beginning of that comeback, and it's super slow. But yeah, I think Alex has been super effective, and reality has punished those who are being anti-nuclear, like the Germans, and people are realizing that and changing their minds. Alex plus reality. That is always a good combination. Arthur, two-part question. While I love that objectivism demands unapologetic justice, I wonder how that applies to events that have happened to you in the past that we can correct without causing more chaos in our lives, while we are all victims of irrationality and injustice. We shouldn't make it our identity. Once we adopt that victim mentality, there's no chance of being successful in life. Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think justice ever involves adopting a victim mentality. It's about seeking justice. It's about people getting what they deserve. And yeah, I mean, if there's a cost to getting people to get what they deserve, and that cost is too high, then don't do it. But at least you know what they deserve. I mean, justice is primarily a virtue, is a selfish virtue. It's for you. The kind of world you want to live in, the kind of life you want to have. And mainly, if somebody's hurt you, maybe it's too expensive and too difficult to punish them in a particular way. But at the very least, you know now to stay away from that person. And that's part of what justice requires. So it depends what you mean by justice. But justice never should lead you on the path of adopting a victim mentality. That would be completely irrational and destructive to your own life. Michael, why do we need art? So, just a quick question, huh? Why is reality not enough? Why is there a need for an artificial arrangement of concretes? Well, because reality is too busy. There's too much going on in reality for us to actually observe in reality a concretization of our most abstract values. Now, once in a while, that's possible. The The launching of Apollo to the moon is a great concretization, and is in that sense serves a very similar function that art does. But art essentializes the most important. It doesn't give you reality with everything that's in reality. It focuses your mind on those elements of reality that the artists think are important. And in doing so, it gives you a concrete for a metaphysical view that the artist has about the world. And you might share that view and respond positively, or you might reject that view and respond negatively to the art. But the art is what makes that possible. It gives you a concretization of an abstraction of some very, very abstract idea that you have. So if you think about if you think about heroism, you could try to find heroes in real life, and a lot of times you'll find that they're mixed, and it's really hard to hold the heroic part of them from the mixed part of them, and there's a lot of stuff, context going around that you don't know and you don't understand, and it's very difficult to respond emotionally to real life heroes. You can sometimes. But a hero in art, the artist gets to decide what story to tell you, what context to create, so that your entire focus can be on the hero, on the value the hero provides you. So you've got a Howard Roark, and you get the full Howard Roark story, and you get from Ayn Rand the essentials of his heroism, which is centered around integrity in his life, and integrity in his work, and integrity in his art. And that gives you kind of a concrete, a concrete and emotional, reality or thing that corresponds to, that's what a hero is. And I feel it. I get the emotional response to it. That's the kind of world I want to live in, where that kind of heroism exists. So we need art because we live very abstract lives. Very abstract lives. And one of the ways we deal with these very abstractions is by creating art and experiencing art. And this is why human beings have been doing it since we lived in caves. And they were drawing on the caves, and they were telling each other stories, and they were maybe singing. And, people developed poetry thousands of years ago. So it's a real human need. And the more our lives are devoted to the abstract, that is, the more civilized we become, the more we become people of reason, where our lives revolve around the mind and the activity of the mind, manifest in action, but the activity of the mind, the more art we need. So we need art more today than we did in the caves. We need art more today than we did 1,000 years ago, when life was very simple. The more complex, the more intellectual, the more abstract the stuff we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, the more we need art. Hopefully that helps. But read the Romantic Manifesto. She explains it much better there. All right, James, I exist. That is all. I find it nauseating. That is Jean-Paul Sartre. This is the crap I was taught in college. Thank you, Ayn Rand and YBS show, or I may have ended up as cynical and miserable as Sartre. Yeah, I mean, Sartre and Camus, the existentialists, were the thing when I was growing up. That was the philosophy all high school kids and college kids were excited about. I exist, that is all, and I find it nauseating. That's the pathetic philosophy of much of my generation, at least when they were more idealistic. They grew out of it, but they grew out of it by becoming cynics, not by embracing reason. Eric, when I turned 13, I began noticing endless contradictions in my Christian parents that my Christian parents were wasting their lives on. I've since stopped talking with them, but now my best friend of a decade is becoming indoctrinated. Suggestions. I mean, it's sad and horrible. The only suggestion I have is try to save your best friend. Do what you can. Challenge him. Question him. And try to get him to read some stuff, some of the Ayn Rand, so the New Atheist, whatever you think will be most effective in showing him the contradictions. And accept the fact that you might lose him. People have free will. They make choices for themselves. They go off and they do crazy things. And do what you can to save him, and accept the fact that you might not. All the advice I have, sorry. No magic bullet. Ryan, Yaron, the federal government of the USA is killing people on American soil for the supposed crime of wanting a better life. Yes. The victims pose no threat to the agents, and the desire to flee invites a death sentence, and no one cares. Why? Well, because we've spent the last at least 10 years, maybe longer, demonizing immigrants, demonizing the other. It's the same thing, lower velocity, lower intensity, that the Nazi did with regard to the Jews. Portray them as rats, portray them as subhuman, and then when they're killed in mass, nobody cares because we're just exterminating rats. And that's kind of what we've done to illegal immigrants. We've dehumanized them. We made them the source of all our problems. We made them the enemy in a war. And therefore, shoot them all. I mean, I know people who think that the problem with ICE is they're too gentle. They should be much more violent, and they should shoot more often and kill more often because they hate illegal immigration so much. And that's, it didn't start with Trump, but Trump gave it words. Trump made it respectable and elevated it and fed off of it. That is why. Dehumanization. And it's all for greater cause, for American heritage. All right, Arthur, part 1. I've heard critiques of Rand's philosophy as infantile. A child or animal only thinks of themselves, whereas a humane philosophy promotes us to see things from other people's perspective. Putting ourselves in someone else's shoes is a sign of maturity. How can you be selfish? Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, you hear that all the time. But they're mischaracterizing what selfishness is, right? Selfishness is not caring about not caring about other people. Selfishness is just, I am the frame of reference. I am the standard. And what is good for man, qua man, universal man, is my standard, reason, rationality. And then I apply it to my life. I apply these universal principles to my life. There's nothing wrong with, selfishness does not mean not putting yourself in other people's shoes. I mean, Ayn Rand was a novelist. She had to put herself in other people's shoes. But often when you put yourself in other people's shoes, you find them lacking. And the question you should ask is, why should I sacrifice for this scumbag? So it's just it's an accusation which makes no argument. It assumes that it's implied. It feeds off of altruism. It doesn't prove altruism. It doesn't make the case for altruism. It just assumes altruism. So it's meaningless. There's nothing much to say against it because it's creating a straw man and then not really making an argument. Arthur, all the people posting publicly how excited they are about Lindsey Graham's death, is this immaturity or nihilism widespread in the culture or only online culture? It's nihilism spread in online culture, not in the culture broadly, but online culture. And of course, You only see certain things. You don't see all of online culture. You just see the most outrageous stuff that is being given you in the feed. It's from the far left and the far right. They each hate, and the people they hate should die. That's just the way they are. So Lindsey Graham's a warmonger. The far right thinks, and the far left agrees. And they both think it's good that he died. But this is nihilism, yes. Wanting the complete destruction of people who disagree with you. Complete destruction. That's nihilistic. Ryan has a follow-up. The Constitution is supposed to protect all people, including illegal migrants, and those with a work permit. Is anyone discussing the lack of constitutional governance in intellectual circles outside of AI? Yeah, I mean, I think you see that in places like Institute for Justice and Pacific Legal Foundation and maybe some others. I understand there's a new legal IJ-like organization that just started by objectivists that are going to make arguments that are objectivist arguments, which is great. So now there's I forget what it's called. Maybe the Center for Objectivist Law or something like that. Anyway, there is a new organization. So I think it's circles that are, and you see, but it's also discussed by, I don't know, people in the center left and center right are talking about it as a violation of the Constitution and constitutional governance. So yeah, there are people talking about it. People are upset about it. It's why ICE had to respond by saying, okay, we're going to stop the ICE stopping automobiles, cars, because of all these killing cases. Jennifer says, look at all the opposition to data centers going on right now. Yeah, blue states, red states, doesn't matter. Texas is banning data centers. Texas, red state. They hate technology. They hate progress. And they buy into the lies about technology and progress because they hate the technology and progress, so they buy into the lies. Michael, two-part question. Psychologists often attribute low self-esteem to criminal behavior. Is the same true of criminal philosophy? I don't know what criminal philosophy is. Kant and Marx had the same low self-esteem psychology as school something. They were just much more intelligent and channeled the destructive energy into creating philosophies that would destroy the world. I mean, I think that's reasonable assumption to say that people who have developed some of the evil philosophers in history, particularly in the modern times, have low self-esteem. Certainly Marx did. I mean, if you actually read about his life, it was a pretty low self-esteem life. He was a mooch. He mooched off of the capitalists, the parents of Engels, who were capitalists. So I think that's probably right. I don't know if that's always true or true of all of them, but yeah, I think you have to have a deep connection with reality to have a high self-esteem. And if your philosophy rejects reality, that's a hard thing. Let me thank a friend Harper and NYK and Eric for the stickers. I appreciate it. All right, let's move to the $2 and $5 questions. We got a series of €5 questions from Taim. He says, I loved Lauren Summers' conservative video opposing capitalism. She's so honest about Christian contempt for capitalism. Yes, Lauren Summers is a piece of work. She's horrible. And her opposition to capitalism. And she loves Dugin. She loves Alexander Dugin. And yeah, their whole attitude is so anti-Western civilization, so anti-capitalism, so anti-individualism and individual rights. And Lawrence Summers once in a while will be particularly honest about these things. So yeah, absolutely. Time, you may not like 1980s popular music, but would you say it's far better than today's mainstream music? I don't know. I don't know much of today's mainstream music. I don't listen to it, so I don't know it. It probably is. Things have gotten worse, probably. But I don't know. It wasn't that great. And it's not good today. But are they good musicians today creating good music? Probably. You just have to find them, and that was true in the 1980s. So things have probably gotten worse, but I don't follow popular music enough to be able to say. Time says, Hunter Biden's chat with Fuentes will not be that interesting, okay? But it's striking how famous Nick has become today. Even Charlie Sheen knows who he is. Yeah, I mean, Fuentes is huge. We know that. Very, very big. I mean, he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson. He was interviewed by, what's his name, the British reporter. So, yeah, he's been interviewed by a lot of big names. They've legitimized him. They've sanctioned him. Jackson Highlander, thank you for the $20 sticker. Really appreciate that. Now we're only $17 away from that third hour goal. Time, Shapiro blasts Tucker for preferring feudalism, but keeps Knowles on the payroll. I can't stand Shapiro's sanctimoniousness. Yeah, I mean he's complete. He's got Knowles and he's got the other guy and who are medievalists in so many different ways. So many different ways. At least Ben Shapiro has been, on occasion, a champion of some economic freedom, of free markets. These guys are just the opposite. They're medievalists. Shapiro's a medievalist only when it comes to social issues. They are consistent. All right, Liam. Given how much you fly to spread objectivism, why hasn't ARI provided you with a private jet? It can also be used as an escape jet to Gold's Gulch if we're on the verge of collapse. Well, two reasons. One, there is no Gold's Gulch. And two, it costs a lot of money. A lot of money. So the Institute is way too small to have its own private jet. Maybe one day, if we had annual income of 100 million or more, I guess a private jet might be reasonable, but we need a 10x or more our annual budget at the Ayn Rand Institute to get to that point. Andrew, there's a powerful line in OPA to the effect that when radical communist sympathizers, professors, witness the misery, poverty, and blood created by their ideas, they remain unmoved. Is there a logic to their being nonplussed? Yes. I mean, I think they realize that they've always known, that communism requires sacrifice. It requires a fundamental change in human behavior, which is going to mean some death and destruction for a while. I mean, they continue to delude themselves into thinking that after a generation of suffering, good things will happen. But it's a complete delusion to rationalize their evil because they can't actually face it. And they look at the suffering and they say, yeah, this is, what did Lenin said? To make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. So people have to suffer so that we can achieve our utopia in the end. And if we don't achieve it, it's only because the leaders were too corrupt. If they'd only been better leaders, then we would have achieved the success of communism. And they will rationalize that to their last breath. Bonnie, thank you for the sticker. Let's see, James. Candace Owens claims that she has evidence. Lindsey Graham's death was actually a Mossad operation to further cover up what really happened to Charlie Cook. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure she said that. I'm sure she has the evidence. I'm sure it's true. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, Rue Downs is suggesting a GoFundMe campaign for my hypersonic jet. I mean, I think we could put in an order with Blake Scholes to get me one of the first booms, and I can use that as a private jet. That would be great. So yeah, I'm open to a GoFundMe to do that. The moralist, the founder's contradiction, enshrining public good above private interest, but also freedom to pursue happiness. We resolve it by rejecting altruism, the right by rejecting freedom and happiness. Yeah, that's really good. That's absolutely Chill fan, are you going to watch Nolan's The Odyssey? Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't miss it for anything. It's you know, it's going to be a big, a huge film. You know, it's an exciting story. It's a good story. I'm curious how he's done it. I'm curious what his interpretation is. Again, it's one of these movies I want to watch on. If I could get to a IMAX, I would go and watch it on an IMAX. It's a big movie with big scenes, with drama. I talked to somebody who saw a preview of it already and said it was fantastic. I'm sure, you know, I've liked Nolan's movies in the past. Not all of them, but most of them I've really liked. He's a good filmmaker. He often, like with Oppenheimer, makes a good movie with no point to it. No point to it. But this one, is he going to make Homer's point? Is he going to make a twist on Homer's point? Is he going to do something completely different? I mean, I'm interested. I'm curious. I want to see it. I see zero reason not to go, and lots of reasons why I want to go. Zeph wants a prediction on Argentina, England. Yeah, God, you know, I think England's going to win. I think Argentina was struggling last game and has struggled. England struggles too, but I think England has more weapons. Argentina is still too reliant on Messi. But it's very difficult to bet against Messi and against Argentina. They find ways to squeak victory out of any situation. So I don't know. I'm excited about the game. Whoever wins that game, I'm rooting for the finals. So if it's England, I'm going to root for England over Spain. If it's Argentina, I'm rooting for Argentina over Spain. But you know, either one would be great. Real Spark, what exactly is working class? Democratic socialists say they want to help the working class. Is it people who sweep the floor for minimum wage? Do you consider yourself working class? It's anybody who uses primarily muscle in their work, where a significant portion of their work involves muscle. So construction workers and sweeping floors and assembly line workers, that's working class. Plumbers and electricians, and you know, they still have to use their brain, of course, but where a significant portion of their work is physical, that's working class. I do not consider myself working class by their definition, or by anybody's definition for that matter. Even though I work, I have no class. That's the problem. All right, everybody, thank you. We did great on the Super Chat and the stickers. I really, really appreciate it. You made up for yesterday and more. I will be back tomorrow at the same time, 7 o'clock, after the Argentina-England game. And then we will have shows on Thursday and Friday, probably closer to regular time. And then we're doing Nikos on Saturday, probably at 3 p.m. East Coast time. And then Sunday, I'll probably do a show before the finals, so early. Oh, we got one last question from Adam. Tamara de Lempicka paintings were featured on the British book covers of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Why is Lempicka so little known in the U.S., even though she chose to live here for much of her life? I don't know, but the reality is that, you know, what do you call it? Representational artists are relatively unknown everywhere, not just in the United States. There's just not that big of a market for their work, or at least there's a market, but there's no recognition of them by the art critics who rejected representational art 100 years ago, particularly in the United States, but really all over the world and Europe. All right, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a great rest of your week. And yeah, let's hope for a good game tomorrow.